Hi, I'm David Carlin, and I'm here to share with you some really important updates in just over 3 minutes about the global energy system, the transition, and some of the latest analysis from the International Energy Agency. Let's dive in. So, energy use last year grew by about 2.2%, which is one of the highest levels in the last several years. So much of that is being powered by emerging economies. And so when we think about decarbonization, we think about energy demand, this is where it's happening. Places like China, India, Southeast Asia, Africa, and areas that are in those parts of the world. It's notable, though, that despite the fact that energy demand is rising, despite the fact that electricity demand is growing, nearly 80% of electricity demand is being met by renewables. So the argument that we need more fossil fuels to power that growing electricity demand is no longer accurate. It's also important to mention that oil has become a smaller share than it has been in the past of global energy demand. And that's partially due to changes in buildings, that's partially due to changes in the transportation sector, specifically electric vehicles. So we'll see whether we're calling an end to oil in this case. What's really important to note, though, is the fact that energy growth was fairly substantial, but it was still behind economic growth. And economic growth itself was behind electricity growth. The point here being that we haven't fully decoupled energy growth, emissions growth, and output. But at the same time, we're beginning to see that more can be made with greener energy. We're seeing greater growth in electricity, and we're seeing most of that electricity demand being powered by renewables. Renewables now actually making up one of the biggest shares of overall energy mix. And I think that's a really promising sign. It also pushes back against this narrative that we need to be building more fossil fuel plants. I think that is certainly not what the data indicates, but we also haven't reached that critical period of decoupling where we can make more with less. And I'll talk about that in a moment here. So looking at our view around the world, what we can see is that places like China and India have been the drivers of this energy demand, but also those other emerging economies. What's important to note are a couple of the other factors that pushed energy demand higher maybe than it otherwise would have been. Those are things like higher temperatures, growing computational demands, and economic growth. The worrying trend, perhaps the cloud on the horizon, is the fact that energy intensity hasn't necessarily improved. As I've mentioned, we have reduced the quantity of emissions needed for any economic unit of output, but the overall energy demand, that energy efficiency, isn't really keeping pace. And so as we need more energy, we're going to continue to need to build unless we can really get more efficient. And so that's the promise of renewables. That's the promise of electrification, to be way more efficient, to really squeeze down some of that excess demand, saving us money and enabling us also to save carbon. Finally, I want to talk about a few of the areas where this progress is being made. As I mentioned, electric vehicles, even with a relative slowdown in Europe, China added over 3 million new electric vehicles to the roads compared to the year before, for a total of over 20 million over the past couple of years. What we're seeing is around the world, this continuing revolution in local and personal transit. We're watching that begin to extend and accelerate into other areas of the transportation market. We're finally seeing, as I said, more and more, if not nearly all of the new electricity demand is being met by renewables. So as I said, really giving lie to that argument that we need more fossil fuels. We're getting to a point very quickly where we're going to be building these things not only to meet electricity needs, but also to move toward electrification for other areas. So that's a particularly promising development. Anyway, this is just a brief overview of what the IEA's data has shown and where some of these trends are going in 2025 and beyond. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, you can read more analysis about it at both through my podcast as well as my newsletter, and you can click below and share these slides with those who might benefit from them. Thank you so much for your time.